Fashion is 70% made of petroleum-based materials. Polyesters, nylons, spandexes. They've got all sorts of great names for them, but they all basically are the same thing at the end of the day, which is they're coming from petroleum. The hard thing to do is to look at the material that you're using to build your product with, because that is so driven down from a cost standpoint. All they do is get the cost level down, 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 down. So every new material innovator out there needs to either be at parity of existing materials from a cost standpoint, or show a roadmap of that to be there within 3 to 5 years. The people that I've never talked to before are still treating me like a startup. You go from the penthouse literally to the outhouse. There's a lot of ghosting, and I've come to appreciate people that get ghosted. I've been ghosted more in the last 4 years than I think my entire life combined before then.
I wonder what comes to your mind when you hear the word sustainability. Maybe you think of solar panels or the electric car parked in your driveway. Maybe you feel a type of low-grade stress in your stomach that's been there since you first heard the word climate change. I'll bet you didn't think about the clothes you're wearing. Well, fast fashion has become a real boogeyman within the world of clothing, covering the world in toxic plastics and destroying vital habitats. My guest today, Eric Liedtke, founded Unless Collective to fight this existential problem. If you haven't heard of Eric Liedtke, well, you've certainly worn his shoes. He was a visionary force behind Adidas. As a member of Adidas's executive board, he steered the Adidas and Reebok brand to unparalleled heights. In fact, during his tenure, Adidas' annual revenue grew by $9 billion. Yes, that's with a B. It is one of the most successful tenures in the company's storied history. So why, in the face of all that success, did Eric suddenly decide to leave Adidas at the end of 2019? That's what we're going to be talking about today. The challenges that come with success and the risks you have to be willing to take to disrupt an industry, and how plant-based clothing is the future of fashion and a sustainable world.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Gabby Reece Show. So since I've seen you, let's say we're moving on 8 years. Eric Liedtke, welcome to the show, by the way.
Thank you.
You have completely changed your life. You went from doing top to bottom at Adidas, whether, I think I read that you started in, literally almost like in the mailroom and you ended up in the boardroom after being the president. And decided to come back to the States. And was your with your new brand, Unless Collective, because there's so much information you got being at Adidas, because you have so much access. You guys are making so many products at such volume. I watched some lectures of you talking about things 5 years ago that would be considered even modern right now today, using AI programming and things, 3D printing. What is it? What happened in Germany for you where you went, okay, I'm crushing it. I could do this until I don't want to. I'm going to take on this new thing, which it doesn't matter how connected you are, how smart you are. It's going to be difficult.
That's a big question. We could spend a lot of time on that. But ultimately, it comes down to what kind of life you want to live and, the impact or legacy you want to leave behind. So to your point, I'm a sports guy, right? If I'm not doing sports, thinking about sports, haven't done sports, I'm not really happy, nor am I very pleasant to be around. However, I found through the years the footprint that fashion and Adidas and other brands have on the world. And for those that don't know, for the listeners that don't know, it's, fashion is 70% made of petroleum-based materials. We're talking about polyesters, nylons, spandexes, lycras. They've got all sorts of great names for them, but they all basically are the same thing at the end of the day, which is they're coming from petroleum. It's procured from the ground. The great thing about those materials is they're super flexible and you can make all sorts of things, footwear, socks, underwear, apparel, everything out of them. The bad thing is they're forever materials. And I wasn't aware of that for the majority of my 26-year career. I only came on that after I met these guys at Parley for the Oceans that kind of educated me to the problem of plastic waste in the oceans. And when you find out about it, you can only whisper yourself to sleep so many times before you decide you're going to put your foot in the ground and look at your children in the eyes and say, well, what world am I leaving for them? And what about their children and their children's children? And the indigenous cultures always talk about 7 generations. So I made a hard decision to leave the perfect job for me, which was the president of the Adidas brand in 2019, and go startup world. And that has been a roller coaster ever since. But the startup is meant to basically be a pioneer of what we call regenerative fashion, which is making things from plants and minerals that when you're done wearing them will harmlessly go away into the earth. They don't create forever materials that break into microplastics, nanoplastics, and microfibers that then inhibit our bodies through what we drink, what we breathe, and what we eat. So to me, that's what we set upon now since 2020. It's been, as I said, it's been invigorating and very challenging at times, but it is the most rewarding thing I've ever done also from a purpose-driven standpoint.
How do you start something new? I mean, you're talking about a very technical thing, something people are going to wear, they're going to wash, you guys have a shoe that, congratulations. I know you received some real awards and accolades for your shoe, but these things are also going to be put to the test. Yeah. This isn't a napkin. This isn't a one-time use plate. How do you even how is the technology even there really to be plants and minerals?
Well, I mean, ultimately, this is going back to our parents, right? So I don't know if you remember, like back in the day, you would inherit hand-me-down clothes from your mom and from your dad. And I still have my dad's University of Pittsburgh Letterman's jacket. I mean, it's made of wool and leather and cotton and, things of good natural materials. It's just about finding those materials and putting them together in a way that is super durable. I mean, even going more current, like when I grew up, Russell Athletic was a great, knitwear brand, and they still are today, in my opinion. But they make things out of heavy duty cotton and cellulose based products. So some of the challenges are going to be easier than others. When you get into clothing, you've got enough off the shelf materials to pull from. Primarily, cotton and linens are your major feedstocks or your major materials that go into it. The diligence comes into then is, what is the weight of the material? How do you put it together? Because most of the stitching, when you put the sleeves on or the collar on or what have you, is usually a polyester or nylon type material, which is a bad thing. So we have to be diligent in how we put those things together. Those aren't really hard. The hard parts of innovation when it comes to getting off of petroleum-based materials is stretch. Anytime you have something that stretches, it's basically melted plastic, and we all love stretch, right? But the data on stretch of how the chemicals that allow it to stretch, also it's now seeping in a little bit through your skin. It's encouraged by sweat, so we have to watch out for that. You have to solve for stretch. You have to solve for prints. You have to solve for dyes. The stuff you color it with and how you color it, because most of those have plastisols, which is a form of plastic to allow it to stick. Fourthly, you then have to solve for foams, especially when it comes to footwear. So the cushioning base that you have underneath your foot is very difficult to solve for. There's not really a lot of foams out there. And finally, adhesives. What glues do you use to put things together? Back in the day, they used horses for glue. I mean, that was the old thing. The horses, when they passed, they'd go to the glue factory. But now it's all petroleum based. So we've had to figure out solutions to all of those. And obviously, footwear is a much harder challenge than apparel. The good news is innovations are popping up all the time. Material innovations are coming along, and people are aware of this issue. So there are solutions, but it is a challenge to be taken on.
For you, especially because you do have footwear, you have a shoe that you've worked on. And I have to tell you, as a consumer, when I hear that you've made one shoe, I actually trust that more, because if to do anything right, people don't realize what it really takes as far as design, innovation, cost, and really going step by step.
Just getting a factory to work with you. I mean, finding a factory that's saying, hey, we'll take on the challenge of not using glues. I mean, they're like, are you crazy? I mean, like, we had to go to Italy where the most famous cobblers exist, because ultimately you want to go to people that know how to craft shoes from your hands. So we're actually, if you think about it, unlearning modern shoemaking, unlearning modern apparel making, because you're going back to the 1950s or even earlier when we made material that was, not plastic based. This plastic phenomenon that's taken over and become so ubiquitous is really an invention after World War II. So that's really been the acceleration, and it keeps accelerating, unfortunately, exponentially almost as it goes up with the rise of companies like Shein.
Right. The fast fashion and things like that. So I can imagine and again, this is not about, getting on big companies. It is what it is. However, I would love to know your perspective where you have a company like Adidas were you guys making like 5 million shoes a year, pairs of shoes a year, kind of something like that? Higher. Okay. A lot of shoes. And I know they have shareholders and I know I get it, but is there any way, because you also feel like they have so much kind of buying, leveraging power because of this volume and this numbers. Yeah. Do you ever does it always have to be a disruptor like, your brand, or do you ever see these big companies being willing to allocate a certain amount of profit to actually trying to figure this out?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was, like I said, I was the guy that ran, the marketing working budget, if you will. So when I was at Adidas, I had about a multi-billion-dollar working budget that was able to be allocated towards things that we prioritized. So I would say, yes, you can tackle it to a point. And that's, I think, one of the questions I always get asked, like, why didn't you do this with Adidas? I said, well, we did. we moved from, we moved from virgin polyester to recycled polyester, which is a big move already. But when you're making, 25 billion euros worth of turnover of product, you can only accept so many, so much of decrease in profitability. So you have to make sure you're procuring materials at a comparable level that you did the prior season, because you're public, right? So you've got a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. Yeah. You've got to grow the top line. You've got to grow the bottom line, or at least not lose on the bottom line. So every decision you make from an allocation standpoint needs to preserve that trajectory that has to go up to the right. That's step one. Step two is you've got 1,000 competing agendas. So at any given time, you've got to be marketing a World Cup. You've got to be marketing a Super Bowl. You've got to be talking about, this athlete or that athlete. You've got to be innovating for, as you mentioned earlier, 3D printing innovations, which are made from, unfortunately today, not very healthy things, as they go into solvents and they use a lot of chemicals to cure them and such. So as you develop these innovations, they're going to make you so let's put it better in your game. Kicking stronger, running faster, jumping higher. That requires a certain amount of allocation to, carbon plates and better foams and lighter materials and different weaving and things like that. Then when you go into lifestyle, which is also a very important part of these brands to drive their growth, you've got now to innovate with artists and entertainers and influencer, make sure that they're, getting the resources they need to create against. And the most famous one, obviously, was Kanye West that we worked with when I was there, as well as like Beyonce and Pharrell Williams and all these great people. But they need resources to allocate towards that, and they want to build things that help you with it. Right. And then thirdly, then you get to the world, right? So if you look at your consumers, so game, life, world, then you get to the world part, which I was very happy that we even started with the ocean plastic approach. But when you get down that road, it's like, first of all, it's unproven. The boardroom's all sitting there, all looking down their eyes like, is this philanthropy or is this good business? And then you have to make a case to get that through. Finally, they're like, okay, this makes sense. We see the brand advocacy you're driving with this, but don't lose money. You have to make money. So now now you've got to figure out how to actually procure recycled polyethylene terephthalate, or rPET, versus virgin PET, which comes out of the ground. rPET is actually bottles that we take out and collect them and spin them up. And the rPET is already, depends on the market, but 50% premium cost to the virgin polyester. So you've got to make a business case for that, because again, you can't lose top or bottom line. And so to do something as innovative now as moving to a plant-based feedstock is like, no, that's unheard of, because it's just going to get lost in the sea of agendas and the financial pages. So that's when I knew I had to step outside, and I was still young enough and ambitious enough when I did at the end of 19 to come out and try this thing myself and put together a fellow committed souls that wanted to, be a pioneering brand of regenerative fashion. And that's what we're doing today. Did
somebody present to you sort of an innovative product that you thought, okay, technology and everything is there enough that I can at least make an attempt to create Unless Collective? Was there a group? Was there a certain type of, either stitching or something that you thought, okay, we can actually have a realistic go with this?
I think it's no secret that the holy grail of sustainability in fashion is to make things out of natural materials. There's no secret whatsoever. Everybody in the industry knows that, but no one's doing anything about it. So because, they do step 1, step 2, step 3. And if right now, every brand will call themselves sustainable, including Shein, which is the very talked about one. And they all say it because, we're cleaning up our scope 1 or scope 2 or scope 3, which is how they define their factory bases. Okay, cleaning that up means what? They're powered by solar energy. Great. I don't throw any shade on that. Or they're cleaning up their offices and their employee commute plans or whatever. There's 1,000 things they can do to make themselves more sustainable. The hard thing to do is to look at the material that you're using to build your product with, because that is so just driven down from a cost standpoint, and call it procuring. We have entire organizations, all they do is get the cost level down, so they can put more margin on the bottom line. And again, that's not a negative. That's capitalism. That is the world that we live in. And so that kind of stymies innovation when it comes to new materials, because every new material innovator out there needs to either be at parity of existing materials from a cost standpoint, or show a roadmap of that to be there within 3 to 5 years. But they can't really get there without the volume. So there's a whole vicious cycle there, because anybody can do anything in lot size 1. But if you want to get to lot size 1 million, you need a brand to stand behind you. And that's where you need visionary leaders in the brands to say, I see where you're going and we'll get there. And that's what we did with Ocean Plastic. And now it's a multi-billion-dollar business for Adidas. It's a multi-billion-dollar business in the industry. It's a fantastic thing. But that's one step and one example of goodness, and there's a few others out there. But really, when you talk about getting into plant-based materials to really replace petroleum-based materials, you need to have outside-in innovation, and then convince the brands that the unit economics will get there with the volumes, and show them a roadmap to that where you get parity pricing, and it's going to drive brand advocacy. And the brands demand both of those, or at least one of those. So if you're going to try to replace something, so that's why you have to do it from a startup perspective and come inside and show them, hey, look what we're doing. We're going to build brand advocacy for you, or we're going to give you material at par, at the same price, but from a better source. And usually it's brand advocacy, and that's why storytelling is so important in this age of climate change and material change, and you have to win the consumers.
How do you start again? Like, did you raise capital for this, and how was that process? Holy cow!
Yeah, so I left at the end of 2019 from Adidas, and I had this idea, in my head. I knew what I wanted to do. I took some time off. Unfortunately, or fortunately, when I left Adi, it was right before COVID. COVID, hit full force in America, March 2020. So I was actually in New York talking to investors. I remember very vividly that like the day before they closed down, and then I caught a plane back to Madison, Wisconsin to spend some time with my 85-year-old parents. I was like, hey, just in New York. Hi, guys. It was before we started, knowing what was really going on. It was kind of like just, there's something going on. Maybe we want to keep our distances, but we weren't masking at the time, and we certainly didn't have any kind of vaccination. So thank goodness I did not bring anything home from New York with me that would have hurt my family. We came through healthy and happy. But so I was there raising money by March 2020, and we basically founded the company during COVID. Came up with the name Unless while I was at the Oregon coast in a beach house, reading the Lorax from Dr. Seuss to my youngest daughter. And there's a famous line at the end where it's like, unless someone like you comes along and cares a whole awful lot, nothing will get better. It simply will not. So it goes on from there, but I'll leave you with that. But so that was the founding of it. Raising the money was all done over Zoom. So I actually enjoyed that because you didn't have to leave your location. So I did it from the Oregon coast and was able to raise enough money to get started and go from there. And we're still alive 4 years later. And we've now modeled out, as you said, a complete collection of wovens and knits and shoes. And we just launched our socks. So we're showing, we're trying to be a lighthouse brand for others to follow, to say, hey, we've solved all the supply chain issues. We've solved the material issues. We've solved all of the different issues. And now as we scale in volumes, we're now solving for the unit economics. So now our plan is to start to talk to the big incumbent brands like the Adidas, like the Nike, like the New Balance, like the Pumas and what have you, and get them to do some partnerships with us because we found a better way.
You talk about that a lot, where you're really open to doing partnerships and collaborations with other brands. And is it still the case that for the moment you're D2C?
Yeah, we just
actually now are you in sort of unique, specific stores that sort of can represent your brand?
We tried a lot of things. Again, startup life, right? You're doing 1,000 things, trying to figure out what sticks. So we went for D2C. We were late on D2C, so we weren't in the Allbirds kind of phenomena of D2C success where you could gain all this traction through social. The Zuckerberg paywall came up and got us pretty good. So you don't get anywhere without paying Meta their fair share. You then have Apple, who's now instituted privacy laws where people can opt out of lookalikes and things from apps tags. And now Google's just decided that they're not going to allow third-party cookies. So you've got all these kind of convergence of saying, D2C is not so easy. So we quickly pivoted the last few months to wholesale, and we're starting at more premium. So we're talking to a high-end denim, menswear, womenswear brand accounts like Brooklyn Denim in Brooklyn, obviously Rolo in San Francisco, Mild Blend in Chicago, kind of those type of accounts. And we're also starting to talk to surf, skate, and snow accounts because obviously, the people that play enough in the outdoors, as you well know, care about the outdoors more, and so they want to see the places they play protected. And then finally, we'll drift into streetwear and stuff. So we're staying pretty premium. Our pricing is pretty premium right now because it's not easy, and I don't want people to take the learning that this is so easy. Everybody should do it. This is hard work. And people need to get paid for what they make, and the product will be as durable as you want it. We're proud that we come from the Pacific Northwest, and we kind of marry this craftsmanship with workwear meets kind of a streetwear vibe. So whether you're skateboarding or cold water surfing, we're the right uniform for you to go out into the elements with. But we're proud to say we make our stuff from the elements, so you can go out into the elements, so it will return to the elements naturally when you're done. So to me, it's like I said, it's a labor of love, and it speaks to all the things I do and live on a daily basis as well.
I have to think sometimes, especially as we work for a lot of years, and you got to a place where, from your job, you're at the top, and you could call anyone and go anywhere, and people are presenting to you and pitching to you and all of these things. What was that like? Because I've started at a lot of bottoms of ladders before, and once you do it like a couple times, you're like, okay, that's fine. I'm down. Like you get to a certain place, one place, and you're like, oh, I'm right back at the bottom of this new thing. What was that process like for you? Not hat in hand, but a little more of that instead of, you were the guy that people were coming to kiss the ring. Where did you go within Eric to kind of, what did you get from that? Because there's also some really great stuff that comes from that. But how was that for you?
I appreciate the question. It takes a lot of reflection to you go from the penthouse literally to the outhouse, and I worked hard to get to the penthouse, and I worked hard to be the guy that got every VIP box and every ticket. And the thing I'm probably most proud of, Gabby, is people like you answered the phone. And I don't say that to blow sunshine up your skirt, but I say it because I get a lot of callbacks. People. So it must mean that I was not an arrogant asshole when I had the penthouse. So to me, it's like there's one one observation that I've talked to my wife about a lot. It's like that observation was really critical for me. And I'm quite proud of it that I did get callbacks. People did pick up the phone and they did say, how are you doing? What's going on? How can I help? And I think that means the world to you. Having said that, you have to have an unbelievable amount of resilience. And the people that I've never talked to before are still treating me like a startup. So it's like I deserve to be treated like it. So it's like when I'm calling retailers now, there's not a lot of like, send us a lookbook, we'll let you know. And then there's not a lot of people calling you back. Or investors, it's sometimes, the investors can be very friendly and helpful. And the ones we have are unbelievable. But there's, a lot of ghosting. And I've come to appreciate people that get ghosted. I've been ghosted more in the last 4 years than I think my entire life combined before then. So, and I had a lot of, it's not like I had a lot of success in my early dating life. So I'm used to being ghosted, but this is a whole nother level. So I think you have to dig in and you have to remind yourself why you're doing it. I do have the privileged place to come from where I was successful and my family is financially secure. So I can take a lighter approach than someone that's really, betting their last dime on this. I'm able to put, my own money into the project and help myself get it. So I don't want to ever think that I wasn't lucky or I haven't had a better foot to start from. I absolutely have, because of those contacts, because of those relationships, and because I've got financial freedom to be able to do this. But I could have easily just gone and tried to learn how to surf better, with my free time. And I decided to put my hand back in the fire, and it's a heavy fire. So there's in startup life, if you're not having a stomach pain at one point in the day, then you're probably not trying hard enough. So you know that, I know, because you guys have done, the coffees, and you guys have done the XPTs, and you've done the podcast. So you know what it's like, but it's like, it's not for the faint of heart at all.
I really admire it because for me, when I heard that you were doing this, a couple things occurred to me. One was that you had a perspective that most people don't ever get to have by your job at Adidas, and just that experience and seeing where some help was really needed, understanding the kind of turnover that, merchandise and producing that kind of stuff, really what it takes and kind of the toll. I mean, dyeing products and all of that stuff. And the fact that you would sort of say, okay, I'm actually in a position that I can go back into this place and help, and having, when we can get that relationship with our ego, I don't know. I feel like it can be one of the most liberating things where you go, I could be the boss, or I could be the guy who's talking to some kid who runs a surf shop and sort of saying, hey, would you be willing to entertain looking at a few of my products?
Exactly.
I don't know. I think that keeps us sometimes from trying things, but even the fact of like taking the responsibility to go, I could help make a difference, and doing that also, as hard as it is, I think the person I'd be really interested to ask would either be your daughter or your wife, to see how much maybe their respect and appreciation of you has grown in this last 4 years. I bet you it's probably pretty profound.
I'd be interested in that answer also, because it's not easy. But I think, I try to reflect a great deal, and I've learned that the truth box is the sauna. Thank you to that advice. You taught me that 8 years ago or so, and now it's in part of my, if not daily, every other day routine. I think it goes into purpose and legacy, and I think I think we all have to live a purpose-driven life at some point, and everyone's purpose can be different. I mean, I believe that I'm trying to move the ball forward in an area that I know very well, and I'm trying to create the change that I want to see in the world, and I want to make sure I can give that to my children and generations to come. But it's also like sitting still is not something. When I role model different people, and again, I want to compliment you and Laird. It's like sitting still is not an option. So retiring, I don't know what that looks like, but I've listened to enough people, I've met enough interesting people that even like I remember. I think I've had a chance to meet Andre Agassi, and I've read from him, but I think he says, and I wrote down, if every day is Groundhog Day, what's the point? So it's like, it's like, we need to at least put our hand in the ground and do something else. I don't know if it's personal development. I've tried to incorporate that as well, but it's like, let's use our skills to help the world be a better place and try to envision what we want the world to be. And I get so inspired from people that are doing that and modeling that for me. I've naturally learned from that and wanted to apply that. And I think some of my restlessness by sitting at the top of a big company internationally was that I wasn't able to do that as consistently as I wanted. And I hope my children and my wife would say that they've seen that. I mean, I'm definitely a more present person at home. I'm definitely a better father. I've got an older daughter who's 26, and then I've got a 9-year-old daughter, 2 different marriages. And I think my 9-year-old and my 5-year-old son are seeing a hell of a lot more of me now. Although I might be stressed out, I try to communicate with them at a different level and say, "Hey, I'm having a rough day. This is what happened," and they all know unless, and they wear all this stuff and they love it. But it's like I just have to talk to them as fellow human beings instead of like barking. I just came home from a business trip and I'm stressed out because my boss is doing this or whatever, and I'm having some sort of internal political war with the chief sales officer. Just random stuff that would stress you out as a human versus. No, I know that I'm giving back, and I know it's not going to be easy, but I know that even if I fail, I've done what I can, and so hopefully somebody can stand on my shoulders and take it to the next place. And I think that relaxes me and internally makes me a little bit more centered and present with my family, if that all makes sense.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for when you really believe in what you're doing through and through. That can be pretty powerful. What comes across for me is, you talk a lot about the importance of communication, the power of communication, the necessity for communication, obviously not only in life, but in your work life. I think there's a lot of people who this can be a tricky and stressful part of, dealing with, for example, you shared that for you, there's sort of a few different types of presentations.
Yeah.
I would just love for you, because this is something, communicating in front of either small or large groups, which you've done lots of both. Maybe you could just break that down for us. And do you think that this was an innate skill that you were thrown in the environment that you fine-tuned? Where did you get these skills from? How did you learn how to adapt to the different types of presentations? I just would love to hear that.
Yeah, listen, I mean, my 26-year-old daughter will tell you, not like religiously, I've told her one thing and throughout her whole life is communication is the key to life. And when we went through, and I'll get back to work in a second, but I'll take a sidebar for a personal story. When I was getting divorced from her mom, and we were going through it, and I went because I was young, I didn't know, so I went to a child psychologist, and I said, "Hey, how can I be the best divorced dad ever? Like, what do I need to do?" And she said, "Be present, be present." And I said, "Well, what does that look like?" She goes, "Wherever you are in the world, whatever's going on, you call every day." And I was like, "Okay." And what's that going to do? She goes, "I don't care if it's a 30-second call. It can be a 10-second call, but she knows you're going to check in every day and communicate with her. And it can be a half hour and it can be 10 seconds. But the point is, she can depend on that from you as a source of communication each and every day, and a source of leaning into you and knowing that you're always going to be there, whether you're in China or Tokyo or Germany or America. It doesn't matter, time zones, you're always checking." And I have to say, I'm proud to say I might not have made every day, but I damn well I was above 90, 95%. And that helped. And I've talked to her since that. And so, now that we went through a divorce when she was 10 years old. So, yeah, so now we talk about it quite often, and it made an impact. So that on the personal side, I know communication is critical, and I know that nonverbal communication is what I try and teach my kids too. Is like nonverbal communication is, I forget the number, but let's say it's 75, 80% of communication, and how you present yourself and how you walk and how you make eye contact and how you do different things says a world about who you are as a person and what kind of energy you want to send into the world. So I had all this, I don't know if they're nature or nurture, I don't know where it came, but when I was assuming my role in Adidas, I recognized that how you enter a room counts, how you walk counts, how you sit counts. Somebody reminded me the other day when I was, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, I've been in the industry 30 years. So let's say I was just coming up. I was 10 years into Adidas at the time. And I used to walk around and tell people to walk with a purpose or sit with a purpose. It was like, I just somehow I get like shoulders back, walk like you're going someplace. Don't just be passive in life, but go forth and do it with a desired outcome, if you will. So when I assumed the role of the, as I assumed higher and higher management jobs, I knew it was important to be accessible, transparent, and frequently in front of teams, whether it be a team of 5 or whether it be a team of 5,000. It did not matter. You had to always be there and speak from the heart and let them see you, blemishes and all. And I'm still a firm believer of that. And I did go and spend some time with Google and Facebook and some of the more software tech companies that were coming up at the time. And they were, very much doing 30-day, talks and chats, and everything was always very upfront and it was very informal. But they would take questions, Q&A from the crowd, and it might be as meaningful as where are we going from a brand or from a direction for privacy to as mundane as why isn't the muesli bar more interesting? So I think it was, to me it was like, okay, how do I incorporate that into a very, staid, mature German hierarchical company, and how do I bring that across and bring that kind of like energy that I want to bring to them? So there was 3 different types of presentations I gave, and we can unpack those if you like. But I think it's I think that kind of gets to it. You want to talk about the 3 different presentations? So
I do. I think because I've heard a lot of things around this, but I think you speak to it beautifully.
Okay, so. The most consistent one and the one I had the most fun was every 90 days I would stand up with no PowerPoints, no structured speech, just a whiteboard behind me, and I would gather a building worth of people. So in Germany, at the Adidas headquarters, we had a building called Laces, and it had this great thing because it was architecturally beautiful. It was an open canyon of a building, and all the floors were all the offices were around it. So you had this canyon going up, and it was mirrored for shoelaces that crossed. So you had these walkways that went across everything. So you could stand in the valley, if you will, and present, and all the people would sit out on the laces or come down. So it was really like an arena type of sitting, and I loved it because it didn't require any setup. I would just show up with a little stage, a microphone, and most importantly a whiteboard, because I'm a huge whiteboard believer. I think you're judged in life ultimately by the size of your whiteboard. So I would stand there and I would just tell everybody, what I thought about the last 90 days, what I did the last 90 days, where I think we should go in the next 90 days, why we should go there, and what we should be focused on, and what I was personally going to do, whether I was going to be traveling or whatever. So and then kind of just riff from there. And I would give myself loose talking points so I didn't, go down rabbit holes and ramble and lose complete track. But it was fun, and it was something that was well appreciated. And I'm proud to say again, I would always get feedback. I'm a big believer in feedback. I think it's a gift, whether you give it or receive it. It's a gift either way. And I think I received very positive feedback on those things because I wanted to make sure it was consistent, I was accessible, and most importantly, I was vulnerable. So if I had things on my mind that I needed to talk through with them, I made sure it was there. And there was more than one tear. It wasn't a big crier, but there was a couple of times when I had to say goodbye to good colleagues that, I'd get tears in my eyes, and it was okay to show that. And it was great because the last day in the office, I gave my last 90-day speech, and that was pretty special. I always have a real soft spot for how they gave me a send off at that time. But the next type of thing was kind of like these hard working meetings where they were very much seasonal briefing. And let's say we did 2 or 3 of those a year. And it was okay. So for fall, winter 2026, the brand needs to accomplish this. Here's our strategy. Here's the business goals. Here's the margin goals. But more importantly, here's the consumer insights. Here's how we're going to come together. And here's what we want to emphasize and de-emphasize. So here's our game, our life, our world strategy. And each of the categories and the people within them would be expected to meet those. And we would invite all creation people. So everybody from design to marketing, to development, to operations, to even sales guys. We would allow anybody that wanted to come in because we wanted that was a kickoff for the creation season, and we believed everybody was a creator. We really worked on the culture to say, hey, through these different cultural insights, we can all create into this strategy together. But it's important that you all hear the strategy at one time together, because what happens if you don't do that, before you would have the top management tell their senior leadership team, who would then telephone game that strategy all the way through the organization. So if you're at a bottom level, you're hearing it through 4 different interpretations, and you don't get to, I don't believe in bottom levels. I believe in people all have jobs and they all have ideas, and we should value all of them. So let's get everybody in a huddle to say, hey, where's the season going? So we would have, 1,000, 2,000 people, conferencing in that presentation to listen directly to myself and my senior leadership team, all giving them direct briefing. So I would kick it off for an hour, hour and a half, and then we'd have the creative director talk about that, the design language for that season. Then we'd have the marketing people and the sports marketing people and the different things going on. So it was a robust couple days of presentations, and then we'd break down to smaller meetings and they have Q&As. But the idea is like twice a year, maybe 3 times a year, based upon the seasons, we'd have that kind of hardworking, lots of detail going out. And then the third type is kind of like the most glamorous, and that's the one that you always find on your LinkedIn pages and stuff, where you're standing with a Madonna type microphone and you're doing this, and there might be choreographed videos behind you and different things, and you'll have Lionel Messi come up, or and then some famous athletes come out, and that's more, that's very rehearsed, and that's more of a sales launch. Okay, now we've got our product made. Now we're presenting to you the sexiest toys that we've made, so the sales markets can go out and sell it. So that was much more rehearsed, much more stressful, because you had to almost be theatrical in your delivery and you couldn't be spontaneous. And at least the last thing you want to be is vulnerable in those. So it'd be top end of being, hey, once a year, send our guys into the field, maybe twice a year, 2 to 3 times a year, hardworking, every 90 days, accessible, transparent, and vulnerable with a whiteboard. And my favorite was obviously the whiteboard one.
So Liedtke, I mean, you've had to be in a role of leadership, and I'm always interested in the traits that show up, for individuals that, you said talk with purpose, sit with purpose, be transparent. Even just saying that you don't believe in a bottom or a top, but everybody has a role. But for you, what were the things? Because I think people have this assumption that leaders think like they know what's going on all the time and they know how to do it. And they don't realize that's not the case. Leaders can make decisions and they can do that. But people have many times during your job, you had self-doubt. But what were the sort of tenets that you leaned on or that really showed up that were so valuable to you and you thought really represented being a good leader?
I think the first job of any leader is to surround yourself with great people. I mean, I think that's the biggest unlock for me, is like, you got to get your team around you, and then you got to trust your team, and you've got to enable your team and empower your team to just go get it done. I'm proud to say I came up with very, very few ideas. When we did the turnaround for Adidas, it's like we put $8 billion on the books in 6 years. I mean, it was the greatest turnaround in the company's history, if not the industry's. But I did very little other than help hire the right people, make sure we had a clear destination in mind, strategy-wise. You had, that's where leaders really, you have to have that. What's that upper right-hand corner of the whiteboard? How we get there is irrelevant, but what's the destination? What does winning look like? And once you have that, and then you hire great people, you just say, go. And the best advice I got is the best advice I then gave to my people. It was like the CEO who hired me was Herbert Heiner, and he said, Eric, the brand is hemorrhaging, reset the brand. I was like, okay, I think I can help do that. I'm the first American in this role. And he said, do one thing for me. I said, yes. He said, don't ask me for permission. Ask me for my advice. And I was like, Now he's a legend, right? He's now the chairman of the board of Bayern Munich, and he's done an unbelievable thing, and he's still a friend. But that simple advice he gave me was I was able to transfer that to my guys then, and with confidence. I was like, if I hired the right people, it's like, ask for my advice. Let's talk things out, but you are empowered to make these decisions. And empowerment's a tricky word, right? Because it's not like, oh, I'm free to do whatever I want. No, you're responsible. I'm giving you the stress to figure out how to win in basketball or running or surfing or training or whatever it may be. You have the responsibility to win them in their game, their life, their world. You have the responsibility to produce the financial results and do the things that are necessary. I'll make sure the brand is staying together without you running, 10 different brands. But I think that's the critical piece of really doing it. So the key to leadership is the people around you, I think, and then really making sure, you do the things that are necessary to communicate and make sure people understand what winning looks like, where the destination is, and giving yourself constant feedback. And that's what those 90-day talks really were about, the feedback of how we did, how I did, where we're going. Let's talk again in 90 days. I think those are types of things. It's like communication and team.
Yeah. I couldn't help but think that the Germans probably were like, haha, it's broken right now. We'll give it to the American guy and see what he does.
It was quite the surprise for me when I was called in, and I was like, excuse me? Because I'd actually, at the time, I took the job. So there was Adidas, there was Reebok, there was CEO, there was Adidas, Reebok. And then, I was down here, I was running the performance team. So there was a head of Adidas, and then there was a board member that ran both brands, and they leapfrogged me up for that. So I'm not sure what their motive was, whether they could point and say, haha, but I think I know the guys now. I know them very well, and they truly believed in me, and I was proud that I didn't disappoint them.
Moving back, how long did you live in Germany?
13 years.
So moving back, what practices did you bring back with you from German culture that you've implemented into your life still today?
The most important part is my wife. So she's German, Katharina Liss.
Good job.
Yeah. So
really important.
I brought her back with me. Both my children, my 9-year-old Amelie and my 5-year-old Cato, they were both born in Germany. So, but I think from a culture standpoint, it's interesting. I mean, I think you get accustomed to operational detail, if that makes sense. You get a question too. I wasn't aware of how passive aggressive Americans are until I lived in Germany. You joke about it, but Germans, I mean, there's a funny expression. Like, Germans will say, they'll say something's okay, it's okay. Now, if I tell you this is an okay podcast, Gabby, how do you read that? It's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, that can go all the ways, right? Okay here means it could be like, yeah, it's okay, exactly. Or like, it's okay.
In Germany, okay means it's okay. It's not good, it's not bad, it's okay. Yeah. In America, okay is passive, I believe, for bad. So to me, it's like, when you start to hear these things, Germans are very, they'll tell you directly how they feel. And I think that's really been beneficial for my personal life, because there's no gamemanship in our family life at all. It's like this is how I'm feeling, and you need to understand. And so that's been wonderful. I think I'm probably overly direct now. I think sometimes I get compared to like Curb Your Enthusiasm, Larry David a bit. So I'm like, I hit people right in there. So I don't think there's time to be wasted to, dance around. And you have to be sensitive and you have to be compassionate, but I think we can also be direct and let people know, like, I'm not enjoying myself. I'm out. So it's like, or whatever. But like, I draw firmer lines around my life. And I think one of the things I've really drawn around, and that's part of leaving Adidas, but it's also part of, I guess, it's more leaving Adidas as well as like, I've committed myself to 0 wasted hours as a personal philosophy. Because when you live in a big matrix, you spend a lot of time doing stuff that you don't feel is really enriching your life or those around you. So, but you're there out of obligation. And I find that to be just maniacally difficult to put up with. So I definitely live a new philosophy of life. If I'm not doing something for myself, for my family, for my friends, or for my world, I'm not doing it. And I suffer no fools in saying no thanks to those things. So, because I think you've got to be selfish at certain things. And I think that's part of the German culture, but also part of coming out of a big ship and now having the liberation to live a different life. But I guess I can attribute that to my background living over there for over a decade as well.
Yeah. Let's go back to Unless. When I hear plants and minerals, I get the plants part. where do the minerals show up? I'm just really curious.
So we try to be, again, very honest. So we're not trying to, I think there's a lot of greenwashing. Greenwashing implies duplicitousness. So let's call it green wishing. There's a lot of people saying we're sustainable. Look at what we're doing. And I call it, that's kind of green wishing, right? It's like wish cycling. If I put it in the magical green tin, it will go away. It's like, there's no way. So let's put that aside. So we try to be super transparent and communicative that, hey, listen, in our shoe, they cure some of the materials, the plant-based materials, with minerals. So they use different, they don't use sulfuric acid, they use citric acid, they use different things, and technically they get labeled as a mineral. So we just say, I'd love to say 100% plant-based, but it's not factual. It's plants and minerals. So we add the minerals there, and we don't shy away from, telling people that we have answers for this, we don't have answers for this. And, I think that's part of the refreshing thing that we're able to do now, where there's no ishing. It's like a lot of people say, hey, we're plant grown. And then you read their website, you're like, actually, you're 90% plants. And what's the other 10%? And they don't disclose it, which immediately makes me think it's some sort of chemical or some sort of petroleum-based plastic, which is okay. It's 90s better than, better than less, but just be honest about what's in it and say you're working to improve it, instead of having the consumer have to dig through and figure out why this is what's in there. Because I'm a vegan, and I'm not going to eat a 90% soy hot dog that's got 10% I don't know. So why can't we have the same kind of approach when it comes to material and footwear and apparel? I think we need to get there.
Yeah, you're not going to fool your customers. And I trust that as a person and as a consumer way more when someone's like, hey, we're doing this better and we're still in the process of doing it better. And that's why I wanted to bring it up. When it comes to, kind of threads and stitching, what are the breakthroughs there? How does that work?
It's not necessarily an innovation per se from a material, because cotton thread exists, it's out there, but getting factories to use it is really hard, because they don't want to. Like the miracle of plastic threads, the miracle of nylon threads is that they can be more flexible. You can use them at higher speeds. They don't break as much. When you go to cellulosic threads and materials, they have different issues and different breaking points and different tensile strengths. So again, different gauges on the sewing machines. These things seem like little things, but as a startup with limited funds and you're trying to find a factory that's going to work with you to do these things, it's just like, are we trying to do things too hard? I mean, it's like there's been many nights I'm like, why are we holding ourselves to a higher standard again? And are the consumers really going to care? Because I pick up, Hanes t-shirt or a Gildan t-shirt and it says 100% cotton. Gabby, it's not, but they're allowed to say it because FTC says they can, because FTC is worried about duties in the Federal Trade Commission versus purity of what they're labeling stuff, where like the FCC with food and drug is very much concerned about labels, but FTC doesn't really care. They just care about the duty importation. So if I'm wearing a shirt from another brand and it says 100% cotton, I can feel it and look in 10 seconds and tell you it's not. It's probably 66% cotton, and they're able to label it 100% because of the way the duty structures are set up right now, which is just insane to me. But that's all policymakers, and those are things that we want to battle. But, again, there's only so much time in the day.
Right. Right. You put up your guardrails and you live by those rules.
Exactly.
It's like what we teach our kids. It's like develop your own code, live by that. Doesn't whatever anybody else is doing. And even sometimes that means to your detriment. Like, well, I'm going to tell the truth, and this person over here might be able to go left and right. But I think, we talk about the long game. You're playing the long game right now.
I love the kid.
You say someone can take a product.
That's perfect. That's exactly what you tell your kids at school. Like you don't be a lemming. Play your game, and let's see. Let's let time be the jury.
Yeah, exactly. You say like I could take a piece from Unless and plant it in my yard,
Yes.
and that would work. But you even have a program where people can send product back to you, and you have an industrial composter. Is this still happening?
Yeah.
And you can guarantee that the product is sort of gone within 30 days and they get a discount on the next purchase.
20% off. So then again, that's not a great, business model from a unit economic standpoint, but we feel like we made a promise. We make a promise to the consumer that one and our customer. And if they want to come and they want to send things back to us, first thing we'll do is we'll try to repair it and resell it, because that's the most sustainable thing you can do. But if we can't, and you say it's been ridden hard or worn hard, then we will take it and we'll send it to Agromin, which is the largest industrial composter in California, who we have a standing relationship with, and we've piloted everything with them, by the way. And they've tested all of our products for which we have certified them as nutrient-rich soil ingredients that they can then resell as potting soil for whether it's your people's rose gardens or tomato gardens. And it's fantastic, because we all go buy Scott's potting soil, what have you, and you put it in your yard. That comes from people like Agromin, which is one of the largest industrial composters in the country, and they're really piloting this, because everybody wants to keep organics out of landfill, and most of textiles is some sort of mixture of organics, and so we're really working with them to kind of certify what can go naturally in. And if you follow the Unless playbook, which we call the Unless regenerative creation model, which follow these steps that we've outlined, from materials to how you put it together, to how you dye it, how you color it, how you then bring it back and then give it to them, they then will turn it back into nutrient-rich soil, which, by the way, is a huge carbon sink. So it's just all sorts of goodness that comes, and that's why it's called regenerative, because every step adds value instead of subtracts value. So yes, we make stuff, sell it to the consumer, they can return it to us, we will give them 20% off their next purchase, and we'll make sure it goes back to soil in 30 days, because the composters, the industrial composters, they need to turn their soil within 30 days. So anything that comes in, primarily organics, food, and yard waste, they have to turn that pretty fast in their molds.
Did anyone from Adidas end up with you in this
Everybody.
company?
The entire team came from my hat. Again, get your team around you, right? So know the people you have. So the former creative director, head of innovation, Paul Gaudio, has come with me, and he and I have been working together for decades. Tara Moss, who's our CMO, she was with Adidas. She wasn't with Adidas directly when we started this, but she was my head of digital for a point in time at Adidas, and she's a rock star, and she's in LA. Martin Tysa, who was my head of strategy at Adidas when we were doing the turnaround in the SBP, he came along, and now he's our chief product officer at Unless. So it's been really good. And then as we build out extensions, whether it be legal counsel or HR, we don't need those departments now, but obviously I've got a pretty clear contact list. I know who to reach out to.
How did you solve dyeing product?
That's one of the 5 horsemen. So dyeing and printing are 2 of the things I mentioned earlier. So again, it's the 5 things that really need innovation are printing, dyeing, stretch, glues, foams. That's where we are still as an industry scratching. So we use best-in-class dyeing techniques, which is water-based dyes. And we, again, test those with Agromin. So they're doing pH testing and nutrient testing from a chemistry standpoint on the soil. So we're making sure all of ours, but a black dye product versus a red dye product versus a blue dye product is going to have different compost standards and different times it goes away. And then also it's going to leave different residues in the soil. So all those things need to be tested out to see how that soil chemistry is coming through. Because we're using water dye, we feel good about it. When we get into printing, like this shirt is black and it's got a white print, that's one of the most difficult things to do, because usually you have to use a plastisol, which is a plastic form to coat the material. So we have to make sure, how we print things, whether it be with direct to garment or whether it be with screen, all those different techniques have to be vetted as far as what are the best in class techniques. I still think they can be a lot better, and there's some innovations out there, but they're just really undercapitalized. So again, it's an iterative process, but we're using best in class right now, and that's kind of the things we need to continue to not let perfect get in the way better, but keep getting better.
Yeah. Is there, and this is the brass tacks, like from a tax or innovation standpoint, is there any Do you get any love from that side, from trying
No, I think
to do it this way?
There's a circular act that just came through the Build Back Better Great Inflation Reduction Act the Biden administration has passed. I think there is a circularity tax break that I've had come across my desk. To be quite honest, I haven't really jumped into it yet. I think it's something we can look at. But yeah, I would hope in Europe there's going to be a lot more because they're ahead in the policy making. I think the U.S. is unfortunately way behind federally on the policies. There's certain states like the New York Fashion Act that is driving home circularity, and if you're over 100, so they're going to pass the New York Fashion Act. It's called, and if you're doing sales of more than 100 million globally, and you want to do business in New York, you have to meet certain circularity standards that need to go. So that's really a domino effect. So if that hits, I know a friend of mine, Ken Pucker, he's monitoring that and helping them. He's like, there's 13 other states that are looking to implement something similar. So we need one domino to go for multiples, and then we need probably some sort of federal. And I think that would be super interesting to relate to. So I think it's just a matter of when that happens.
Do you have, we're going to direct people to unlesscollective.com. Yes. And does the website say where the stores are by any chance?
No, we don't have any retail stores ourselves. We don't have a retail.
No, I mean,
yeah.
In places.
No, I hear you. We don't have that yet. I can give you a list if you guys want to put that in the show notes. We're not open too much.
That'd be great.
I'm making calls all day long, and I'm about to get on my car and go out and see some people. But it's I love that stuff actually, though, because I love talking to people.
Do you have a product or SKUs that you're like, these are our hero SKUs, just so if people go there, they can just kind of, go straight to the stuff that you're like, check this out.
Yeah, I think, all of it's beautiful, but I think that
I did look at it.
There's some knits that I would say, listen, the t-shirt I'm a t-shirt connoisseur, and we make an 8-ounce buttery interlock t-shirt that, is the best. And I can't wear another t-shirt anymore. But I'd say the French Terry crews are probably my favorite item. I think the hoodie we're taking from a fleece to a French Terry, which is going to be really nice. So the French Terry gives you that really nice drape, but also gives you a really worn, kind of comfy for those cold Malibu evenings. You guys want to snuggle up by the fire. I think those are great things to get into. And I would say they're all garment dyed, so they've got that nice little detail from a premium standpoint on like how they hang and how they look from a color standpoint as well. They've got a little personality to them. So I'd say really the French Terrys, the French Terry crew, the French Terry pant, French Terry short, and then the t-shirt. Those are our big sellers. And then the hoodie's going to be also in French Terry. And then I'd say from a woven, we've got great jackets that were inspired by walking through the old growth forests in Pacific Northwest, going to surf breaks, because there's one famous surf break in out here called Short Sands or Smuggler's Cove, and it's about a kilometer walk in through a beautiful old growth forest, and it's just that's my spot. That's where I like to go whenever I have time, and we wanted to make a jacket for that walk. So whether it's raining or whatever, so it's lined and unlined, and it's just really quite comfy, really quite appropriate. Better than wearing some sort of plastic PFA lined, jacket that's, may keep the water off of you, but it certainly doesn't feel wholesome.
Right. I keep thinking that all you need is, one French or one Italian house or New York house, fashion house to do a capsule collection, something fabulous for the runway with your technology and materials. I'm sure that's going to happen, but just even to, make the story sexy, because everyone's like, oh, fabulous, all of
Absolutely.
that. So
no, I agree, man. We're working on collabs and partnerships as we speak. We got some good things coming for 24, and now we're just looking to get the right wholesalers and find maybe a couple ambassadors in the surf skate snow world. I think it'd be really fun.
Yeah. So last question, you've been to probably more sporting events than most people. I would imagine a ton of football, as in the real football, the original football. Why do we call it that? You barely use the foot. What was there ever a sporting moment that I don't know, just was you thought, oh, this is a special thing I'm witnessing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm American, right? So my family all grew up in Pittsburgh. I had the luxury or privilege to secure, I think, 12 tickets to the Steelers Super Bowl in Tampa Bay when they played the Phoenix Cardinals. And, that game was unbelievable. I just rewatched it the other day, whether it be like James Harrison's interception return for a touchdown or the last play of the game when, or almost last play of the game, but when Ben hits Santonio Holmes in the back of the end zone. So to me, that was like this, I'm a complete homer. That was it. Sporting events don't get better than that. And I had my parents with me, my sister with me, my oldest daughter with me, and Paul Gaudio, or my creative director and best friend, his family was there too. So it was just like this. It was unreal. And I remember walking. I had to walk in and meet Roger Goodell in the box because obviously I was representing Adidas at the time as well. And I go in there with my Jack Lambert football jersey on, like everybody else is in suit and ties. But I was like, Bruce Springsteen's on stage. It doesn't get better than that. But from a work standpoint, right. I went to the World Cup in Brazil also, and I saw Germany just destroy Brazil, which was a big rivalry on two levels, right? There was the German football rise to being world champions that year and beating Brazil on their home field. But then it was also like we were sitting in the box next to a bunch of Nike execs and having some fun because, obviously Adidas sponsors Deutschland and Nike sponsors Brazil. And it was good. It was good fun. Nobody was injured during the game, but it was a lot of fun talking back and forth. So yeah, those are the two moments I would share.
Well, Eric Liedtke, congratulations. I wish, huge success. And if people, again, want to check out the line, they can go to unlesscollective.com. And do you want to direct them anywhere else? Or I
mean, there's 3 big accounts we have open up right now. Brooklyn Denim, if you're in New York, Rolo in San Francisco, and Mild Blend in Chicago. More to come. And we'll start to put them on our website and make sure we promote them on our Instagram as well.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you, Gabby. Pleasure to see you again.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you want to learn more, there is a ton of valuable information on my website. All you have to do is go to GabrielleReece.com or head to the episode show notes to find a full breakdown with helpful links to studies, research, books, podcasts, and so much more. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and send them to @GabbyReece on Instagram. And if you feel inspired, please subscribe. I'll see you next week.